Notes app on their iPhone is another way you can create scans of your work. But I kept on going back to kids and saying this scanned version is just beautiful. I mean, I think.
Yeah, I stole that because I was talking to uh, Anson, and he was telling me that you guys were pushing this as a department. So I've had some of the kids working on that. They don't have to actually. They're not going to do a graph. They're going to actually, but they have to show any calculations.
Yep.
So they'll have like something like this that they can just scan some of their basic math. They have to show that, with the FRQs that they're doing.
Yeah.
So
And
that
what
either Cam Scanner worked, or you said the Notes app on their iPhone. They did that, but the Cam Scanner just looks good, doesn't it?
It just looks fabulous. The one thing I would say that to kids is, unless you get the pro version, there's this watermark that's down here at the bottom, and sometimes it shows up over here, depending, I think, on the version you get. And if you write all the way to the bottom of the page and you start writing over that, it's hard to distinguish what's what.
Right.
The other thing I found, Scott, was I found kids that used lined paper like this, or here's a kid that used graph paper. I personally, reading it, I found the blank white paper with blue or black ink just the best.
So you're able to access this stuff right away after they took the test, or is this just
no? So over the course of the past 6 weeks, I've had them do a bunch of different FRQs. Last week, I assigned 8 different FRQs for them to do, and I told them they had to, like, one time I had them take a picture of it, then one time I had them, and then the other times I had them email me the scanned version of it, and then I graded them like I would normally, but I made them do it over and over and over and over, mainly because I wanted them to not be, if they did have issues, like you were talking about a kid having issues, that they had practiced it so many times that they would be able to get through it. And that's where I think, all my kids just kind of were like, well, shit, I've done it so many times for Alquist. I don't need to, I can do this again. It's just another, and I made them kind of stick to 15 minutes and 5 minutes to upload it. And they were kind of on their honor system for that, but I made them do it so many times that this is 2 of the value versions that I got, just from having kids do it. I also told them to use blue or black ink and don't erase things, that if you don't want something, cross it out, because as an AP reader, we just won't read this stuff. That stuff just isn't read. And then we go through and do it. One thing I did say, like,
You're saying don't erase it, just cross it off?
Just cross it out. Don't erase it. If you erase it, it's really, A, you're going to have to be using pencil, and B, it doesn't erase well, especially if you erase and then write over where you're erasing. One thing I did say is, don't cross something out and then write nothing else after it, because, like, this girl Mimi crossed all this stuff out. Now I can't read it. There's correct work in here that this kid would have gotten 2 more points, because they would have been able to, she would have recouped 2 more points and then went on and didn't write anything else.
Gotcha.
So I told them over and over, if you cross something out, make sure you're going to write something new down. Otherwise, who cares if it's wrong? Because if it's wrong, even if you're second guessing yourself, it really doesn't matter. And I had kids, all kinds of kids do, all kinds of different work. This is a kid that did it on lined paper. And I thought this was a little bit harder to read, but I actually thought that's why I kept on telling kids, if I were going to do it, I would do it on on plain white paper with blue or black ink. Is just
Yeah.
what I would do every day of the week.
Okay.
If you do have them make a picture of it, the one thing I would say is they got to make sure that that the type file is either that PEG or JPEG or JPEG file, because some Apple phones will do a high efficiency file. It's an HEIC file, and if they use that, either the file is too big or AP just isn't accepting it. And so if they don't practice it, then they could get in trouble with that.
Well, those pictures that the kids submit are hard to read a lot.
They're hard to read.
I've been running into a lot of problems with that.
I kept on telling them that. I said, even this one's pretty good, and I still think it's not nearly as easy to read as this one. I don't know the other thing I was finding with my kids is my kids had, A, B, C, D, parts. And I said, draw a line in between your parts, because I found that, this person over here with the picture didn't draw a line, and it became really hard to figure out where did you quit doing part A and start doing part B. And I just didn't know. And it was really hard to determine. So I'd tell kids to separate their parts of their work by drawing that line in there too.
Got it.
Eric, I do have 2 more questions.
Yeah.
So I met with my AP Stats kids, and they had a couple questions I didn't have the answer to.
Okay.
First question: the AP ticket email. When did that come out?
So that's a good question. It came out. I think, a day before the exam. It might have been 48 hours before the exam.
Okay.
That's one thing I was going to mention, is sometimes it showed up for some kids in their spam. And so one kid was kind of freaking out about it the day before and didn't have it, and it was in that AP ticket was in their spam folder, but they also are able to access it through AP Classroom. So if they're in AP Classroom, which they should be, because Miss Jamie had loaded them in there, if they've accessed that, or at any point in time during the year, that's another place they could access it. But they ought to get it easily 24 hours before the exam. And literally that wasn't an issue, other than the kid that found it in their spam. One kid kind of freaked out the day about 12 hours before he was going to take it, but he ended up finding it probably in his spam, or probably skipped over it. But that email, I think it's one of those things where in that email, like you can do that practice FRQ, and I think in the email, or the practice submission, I think what happens is there's this link that's attached to it, and I think as soon as you click that link in your email, that's what shows up.
Okay.
And then
have you guys been overwhelmed? Have you guys been overwhelmed by all the emails that are coming in, and how did you go about sort of troubleshooting and sorting through all these? And
which ones are you talking about? Because I felt like I was overwhelmed like crazy.
I mean, it's nonstop. I'm trying to like figure out what I'm doing for my classes and my review, and I'm just getting bombed. And I've kind of defaulted by just passing on all kinds of stuff to the kids.
Yeah.
But, I don't know. Did you have better luck at navigating that stuff, or what?
My biggest thing is it was a real moving target. I felt like throughout the whole thing. So like the handwritten work, early on, AP was only accepting pictures of handwritten work. And then about a week and a half before the exam, they figured out how to do PDFs. And so then they said you could do a PDF. So I found myself backtracking. I found myself with the kids trying to navigate every little piece. Normally you can answer one question in class and applies to 15 different kids. And now I feel like I'm answering 15 questions that's all the same question, but I have to answer it 15 different times because I'm doing it through email. I've found it just obnoxiously difficult to try to navigate, and then on top of that, with all the other things that come in, some of which is really important on our own email, some of which isn't. I mean, honestly, Scott, for good or bad, I let some of my other classes slide quite a bit last week, in anticipation of taking this exam, because I knew that, ultimately, if they do really well on this exam, it's real money to these kids, and it's and I kind of felt like I owed it to them. So I let some of my other classes kind of slide a little bit, and now I'll pick up the pieces on that this week. But I found that to be tough during this whole distance learning, honestly.
Yeah. Greg and I have talked about that and how you can cover something, for a couple days in class with the captured audience, and that they'll internalize it a lot better than if they remember to open something, or they don't look at something else.
Yeah.
It's very frustrating. I've kind of put the onus on the kids and just passed the emails on, but I'm nervous about that.
Well, I mean, I know that one thing that really worked well for me personally was I started on here. I started literally assigning, like last Friday. I was assigning things at a feverish rate. On Friday, I assigned, all these practice FRQs, and I kept on telling them, you gotta. I mean, this was one day, and I kept on saying, you got to dump this in there. And then I found this was at least an easy way for me to kind of, like put an assignment out there, and then, if they did it, I could grade it all in here, and if they didn't submit it, some of these kids that didn't submit it, I could kind of follow up with them. But then the assignment in general, I just made in Google Docs and attached it that way. And so, like, this was one of the practice ones, and I told them, you got 25 minutes, you got 5 minutes to upload it, you got to stick to it. Email me your solution, because I knew my kids weren't going to type it. They weren't going to type it, but even for Greg or for U.S. history, I think I'd probably still make them, upload and send me an email of the file, so they at least have a practice at attaching something to their to an email or to something and sending it, because I think that's why my kids didn't have much of an issue with submitting it. And then some of them, they could put pictures in here if they wanted to, because I still gave them that option, even though I thought it was a pretty bad option. But I just created these things in Google Docs, and then when you put it in, you can just attach a Google Doc to it, and then that lets them do it. One thing I did find is I found that so I had them rate their experience, and I thought it was interesting. I actually had them. They said that it was about is either easier or about as hard as they thought it would be. But then when I asked them if they were prepared, more of them were prepared this year than ever. And I think I was a little bit more focused on what should I give them for stuff, because I had to kind of triage it, where sometimes I think I just kind of throw a bunch of stuff to it and hope it sticks. This time I had to kind of pick and choose and say, okay, I got to give them this and I got to give them that.
I feel inadequate. You're a lot more tech savvy than I am.
I'm making all this up on the go. I tell you what, I mean, I just didn't know what the hell to do. I wouldn't have known this 7 weeks ago. 7 weeks ago, I never used Schoology. Honest to God, I only used Schoology to put a PDF up there. 7 weeks ago, I never put a Google form out there. I think this is the first Google form I ever made right here. So I'm making this shit up on the fly.
Well, I'm impressed though.
Makes it look like I know what I'm doing, but I don't have any clue what I'm doing.
You know, when I talked to them today in Google Meet, I got a feeling what the ones that came were, you know, they understood what to do better than I understood what to do.
Yeah.
Is that kind of what you felt too? Like for them, it's like, oh yeah, I'm just going to make a, you know, I'm going to type it in Word and then, you know, do to this, this, and this. And I'm like, okay, sounds good to me, you know? And so
You know,
it definitely the kids that had you, it helped because they had kind of been through that process. So
well,
I think it made a difference.
yeah, honestly, most of the stuff that I got from the kids came from most of the things that I've done came from suggestions from students. You know, that stuff about airdropping it or emailing it or creating a special folder. One kid said that she cleared her entire desktop, so the only thing that was going to ever show up on her computer was a downloaded file. I had one kid that showed her room the day before the exam, and she had taped notes to 3 of her walls in her bedroom. She had just taped her notes right to the wall so that when she's taking the exam, she knew exactly what she needed to look at. I don't know what kind of level of notes, but like I'm just thinking like if I were doing an AP psychology thing and there were some kind of things like Maslow hierarchy of needs or something that Freud would do, if I had those notes sitting right in front of me, not sifting through them not sifting through them like on my desk, but actually had them taped to my walls, how much more valuable that would be to me taking a test. And that's what one kid suggested. She just said, "Yeah, I got it all here." And another kid said, "Well, I have it all tabbed in a folder in a spiral, and so I can find everything just based on the tab that sticks out." So I had kids doing really amazing things that I didn't even think about, and they just did them. And then I kind of passed that information on to more. But yeah, one kid, Claire, she's the one that taped everything to her walls, and I bet you there was a lot of kids that had things taped to her walls after she said that's what she did.
I got one more question.
Yeah.
Do they have to take the test on a computer? Can they do it on their phone?
They can do it on their phone. I would. So when I'm thinking about this, if at all possible, I would do it on my computer. And the reason I would say that is I would use my phone, especially I'm speaking out, for a handwritten piece of work. I would use my phone merely as a document camera. I would only use that piece. I wouldn't want to be flipping back and forth between windows on my phone to figure out when am I going to use what, I'm going to have either the Notes app or the Cam Scanner or the Photo app open. And then in the background, I'm also going to need the prompt and maybe even my email open because that's how I got into it. I think about it and I go, what would I do? I'd open it on my computer, read the question on my computer, write it on a notebook, use my phone to scan the thing or take a picture, send it to my computer, and upload it. I mean, I couldn't. I mean, I know that when I have 14 windows open on my phone, it's very difficult to go back and forth in them, and I would get flustered, and I'd close one inadvertently when I meant to just open another one. I'd end up closing one, and then where did it go? And now I'm really stressed. So I wouldn't do that.
So, Eric, I've been going through the PowerPoint that was sent out by the College Board, just that kind of walks through the process, as well as passing along that checklist that they have to fill out for each class. And then I also link them to those videos. in terms of how the walkthrough video that shows you how to go through that.
Yep.
Was there anything in terms of the process? I noticed on your documents that it looked like every student put their APID number and their initials at the top of each page. Is that something recommended?
That's actually required.
Okay.
This thing, when one of the things, and that's why I started having them do it, because I wanted them to remember to do it at all. Even if they're typing it, even if they're typing it like an essay, like a DBQ or something like that, they're supposed to write their AP number, their initials, and then they're supposed to put page numbers with it as well. So like there's page 1, and then do the same thing on page 2. And so that's something, if you're going to have them do it, I'd probably encourage a kid to set that up ahead of time, so they're not worried about doing that on the day of the test, that's something that they're just ready to go with right out of the gate. But they all kind of did it. Here's Maya's was, here's her number. And I think actually Olivia did it wrong. I think you're supposed to I think it says to put the initials underneath. I don't think that would be kind of splitting hairs, but definitely it says on the left-hand side, your AP number, your initials, on the right-hand side, the page number. And Maya's, just because it happened to be 2 pictures, Maya's second one looked like this. So it was the same thing, only it was page 2.
And as far as being a table reader for the, or table leader and reading these, have you gotten any kind of guidance from the College Board around, what kind of leniency you're supposed to give students regarding the difficulty in this upload process, or in reading these, that might be good for us to know on the front end?
Yeah, so we really haven't gotten any information. I think that's going to come. So I'm a question leader this year, and so I kind of think I'm going to have to be partly in charge of figuring out where to draw that line, because I'll tell you what, there was one, like, this was Ivy Houtz's picture that she submitted, and I said to her, I said, if you submit that, nobody's going to read that. Nobody's going to look at it. They're going to give you no credit for it, because they're going to be like, I can't read that, so I'm not going to give you credit for it. Now, maybe that's a little too harsh, but even if I zoom this in, it's still pretty hard to read. And if I were relying on a reader to read that at home, as opposed to reading that at home, which would I rather read? I look at that, and that's the exact same question. And I'm not giving the one on the left nearly as many points as the one on the right, even if it's the same work, because I'm going to miss something on it. And that's why I kept on saying you have to practice it. You have to practice it. I even told the student on the left, I said, look at your picture. If this is the best you can do, I worry about you. See if you can get a different piece of technology from your parents or something, at least on the level of what I was saying with Bobby is, even for that hour of just using it as a document camera. And that's where just practicing it. I don't know what we're going to do, Greg, because at one point I was kind of told that it would be good to have my kids type their work, but I found that was really cumbersome. And I know that AP is accepting normal things that you would type out mathematically that they now are accepting in a much more of a worded response. But I don't know what that's going to look like. I don't know how many kids actually went through the typing process. I'm guessing most kids were going to use their phone as a camera or as a scanner and then upload that. But that's
so
try.
It's almost, it's really hard for me to comprehend those students who did the calc or are going to be doing the physics to actually type these out. I mean,
Yeah.
it's really hard for me to imagine those notations being done on a computer. I mean, that is so contrary to what they've been doing all their life. I mean, I just really think it, you know, almost is like a default. You got to take a photo or scan it.
Well, and that's where I think AP kind of figured that out. That's why it was kind of a moving target, because at one point AP said that it had to be a picture of handwritten work, and it couldn't be a PDF of handwritten work. And like literally like a week and a half or a week before the exam, they had resolved that issue and were going to allow PDFs. And so that's when I heard that, I jumped on that, and that's why I started getting kids that produced this work over here, which I thought, okay, that's gonna fly. And I made them practice it over and over and over. So, you know, if your kids, Greg, if you have kids that, you know, if they're a really poor typer, they may handwrite it. They may handwrite it, but I
do think that that's going to be less of an issue in my test.
Yeah.
I think for Scott, that is, I would highly recommend, Scott, you consider recommending that they do what Eric is doing here and either scan or handwrite it and take a photo. Just because you will have graphs and notations that need to be done for an econ test.
Yeah, I know. You know, luckily they do not have to write a graph or draw a graph, but any mathematical, you know, calculations have to be submitted.
Yeah.
So
one of the things, Greg, and Scott, with like a DBQ or an essay, I would probably, as I'm thinking about what would I do, I would probably lean towards like typing it in a Google Docs format, only because if something were to happen and my computer were to crash, or I didn't save my work and then I closed the program out inadvertently, you know, then suddenly I don't have that. I don't have that work, where in a Google Docs, it's saved in real time. And so I'd probably lean towards doing something in like a Google Docs, because unless I was saving it every 30 seconds or something like that, because I'd hate to get through a thing where I typed a bunch of stuff and then suddenly my application froze or went down. I would have more confidence in a Google Docs being able to recover that. I will tell you that you know, one of the things AP I think was kind of expecting not to have, because they kind of gave kids an out for not doing the exams. They kind of gave kids an out saying, well, you don't have to do it, we'll give you a full refund. I have heard from a pretty reliable source, actually an extremely reliable source, that on the calculus exam yesterday, over 400,000 kids submitted their work. And normally we have 450,000 kids do the exam. And so we're not talking even, I don't think, about the kids that are gonna do it late, right? The kids that had a problem with submitting, we actually already had, you know, over 400,000 kids submit their work. So it's as big as it always has been.
Did you have any students that you know of that didn't take it that were scheduled to?
I don't, because I didn't kind of check in with them that way. I would guess that I probably had, I mean, I wouldn't be shocked. I can think of about 3 or 4 kids that, based on how disengaged they were throughout this distance learning so far, that I would guess that they maybe didn't take it, but I don't know off the top of my head. You know, I just.
When is it that we'll get their documentation of what they did? I can't remember. By the end of the month?
No later than May 26th.
Okay.
And I think they're waiting for that because I think they're going to cross-reference kids that asked for extensions or asked to do the late exam. And I think what they're going to do is they're going to check, they're going to use this time to figure out, is a kid asking that for legitimate reasons, or are they asking that because they want to just see if they can better their score or something like that? Like, did they really have a problem submitting it, or are they really just looking to see if they can retake the test in some way? And so I think that we're supposed to get our scores, our kids' work by the 26th. And I think they're making a decision about all retakes by the 28th of May. And then the kid has to turn around pretty quickly because June 1st is when the calculus makeup one is. So they kind of have to already know that they're trying to get it. But I think that that's kind of the time frame that I'm guessing that it goes with. So
Thanks for all this input, Eric. It's really helpful.
Hopefully it's helpful.
Yeah, it is. Thank you.
Yeah, if you have any other questions and you think about it after this, just email me or let me know. You can call me or whatever. And
I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
yeah.
Bye, you guys.
See ya.
Later, guys.
You good, Bobby?
Yep.
Okay. Talk to you later. Hopefully this was helpful. Anybody that that needs more help, just let me know. I'd be glad to help you out, talk to you individually.